It was probably 5 a.m. by this time, and we had been out on the streets all night long. We'd probably gotten to Bourbon Street about 11 p.m., and God was just moving in such an incredible way that right before 5 o'clock, I gathered up the team and I said, let's go. I said, we've got to get out of here. I said, it's just about morning. And I said, whatever you do, do not make eye contact with anyone because we'll be here another couple of hours. It was just that type of harvest time that we were having in the French Quarter, and specifically right there in Bourbon Street. But as we left, we began to round the corner, and I was out in front, and I noticed probably 30 or 40 yards ahead of me was a taxi cab, and there were two scantily clad young women leaning in the window, revealing themselves to the cab driver, and a young man was behind them. And suddenly the Spirit of God spoke to my heart and impressed on me. He told me to tell them that Jesus is coming back. That's all He told me to say, is that Jesus is coming back. And so without even breaking stride, I just loudly said, hey, and they looked and I said, Jesus is coming back. And I just kept walking, expected them to either ignore me or to say something snide and go back to their perversion. But as soon as I passed them by, the young man ran at me, and his eyes were bugging out with anger and violent anger. And I just began to pray for him and bind that spirit of violence off of him. And he really wanted to engage us in some type of physical altercation. But as I continued to pray and bind that devil off of this young man, he broke. And within seconds, this young man that was wanting to engage me in some type of violence fell upon my chest, and he was literally heaving because he was weeping so hard. Little did I know that the two young women that were with him were stopped by a sister of the Lord that was trailing from the back end, and she began to minister to them, and the Spirit of God hit them, and they began to weep. They began to weep and cry before the Lord. But what is so amazing is when all this started happening, two young men that were from another state that were there partying thought that there was some type of fight or something breaking loose, so they do like a crowd does, and they began to rush over. And as soon as the youngest of the two brothers crossed the street, the Spirit of God hit him, and he dropped down to his knees. And he tried to get up and run from the presence of the Lord, but he could not get away. To make a long story short, within just a few minutes, those two brothers had repented for their sin, given their life to the Lord Jesus Christ. The young man that I was now holding in my arms began to cry out to God and began to weep, began to confess a lot of sins. And the two young women as well gave their hearts to Jesus. Folks, listen, the harvest is plenteous, the labors are few. All He's waiting for is somebody to say, yes, Lord, I'll go and I'll tell them the truth. Folks, listen, the battle's not ours, but the victory's ours. But He says, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. But how can they call and believe upon Him who they've not even heard about? How can they hear without a preacher? God's just looking for somebody to go out there and to engage a culture with the name which is above every other name, and that's Jesus.